My name is Samantha Oakley from ALA's Public Programs Office. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We're excited to have Janie Hermann, Hannah Schmidl, and Leah Hamilton with us today to speak about creating engaging STEM programs for your adult patrons. I'd like to start things off with a few quick announcements. Today's webinar is presented by ALA's Public Programs Office with support from ALA's Cultural Communities Fund. To learn more about the Cultural Communities Fund or to make a contribution, visit ala.org/ccf. Hopefully many of you are familiar with Programming Librarian, a website of ALA's Public Programs Office. We have a lot of program ideas and an online learning library full of free webinars like this one. We also send free e-newsletter twice per month. To sign up, go to programminglibrarian.org and click About. Finally, a couple of notes about our virtual classroom. Only our presenters have microphone access, but you are welcome to type your questions or comments in the chat box. We will have time for a Q&A at the end. Also, if you have technical issues, please send a private message to Brian Russell. To do so, hover over Brian's name in the upper right-hand corner of your screen and click Start Private Chat. Now I'd like to introduce our first presentation today, which will showcase Princeton Public Library's History of Science series. This series was a set of public programs designed to showcase a variety of lectures, films, discussions, and activities that explored the history of science through multiple viewpoints. Presenting on the series are Hannah Schmidl and Janie Hermann from Princeton Public Library. Hannah is a public historian committed to connecting people to meaningful humanities content and is currently working as the National Endowment for Humanities Fellow at the library. In this role, she plans public programs, helps with collections development, and acts as a liaison to various community groups. Her co-presenter is Princeton Public Library's programming librarian, Janie Hermann. Janie oversees 2,000 plus programs created by the amazing team she works with. Janie is the co-chair of ALA's Programming Librarian Interest Group and was named a mover and shaker by Library Journal in 2007. She is a frequent speaker at conferences on the local, state, and national level. Without further ado, I'll turn the mic over to Janie and Hannah.
Hi everybody, Hannah and I are showing up on your screen as one presenter. So this is Janie speaking, and I'm going to start off, and Hannah and I will switch back and forth a little bit throughout the presentation. Since we co-planned it, we're going to co-present on it. Let's get started. So I'm going to start out, and we're here to talk about a very successful series that we did last spring on the history of science. And this was presented over the course of about 6 weeks here at Princeton Public Library. But before we get started on that, I was just going to give you a little bit of an overview about the programming here that we do at the library in general. So to start off, we are a single branch library. We are a municipal library funded by the town of Princeton, which is a very active and vibrant downtown area that we're located in. We are walking distance to all of the local schools, pretty much, which is great, the high school, the middle school, several of the elementary schools. And we're also just a couple of blocks down the street from Princeton University. But we have a lot of other academic institutions in town. So it's a very academic town. We're fairly well staffed here at the library with about 54 full-time equivalents. And we have a cross-departmental program to our cross-departmental aspect to our programming with a team of 15 members from all departments that help plan our programs from infants to seniors. The number of programs that we do varies each year. This year we're down a little bit because we're under construction. So it's anywhere from 1,700 to 2,000 a year with overall attendance, about 50,000 per year at our programs. So that's a little bit about what we do at our library in general. And as I said, we're a very active programming library. It's not unusual for us to have, 8 programs on a day, sometimes as many as 12. That includes all of our story times, our technology classes, as well as special events and lectures. So in this busy environment, why did we decide to do a series on the history of science? And why did we think this would be appealing and what we hope to get out of it? So we know in our town that it is a town that loves science. And we had been doing a variety of ways of exploring it. And starting in about 2010, we started doing Pi Day, which was successful annual program related to the history of physics and Albert Einstein's birthday, which is, of course, on 3.14. We had done some one-off lectures on Pi Day that were really successful that looked at the history of science and the history of physics. And we had, joined in with, if you go to Pi Day Princeton, you can see the amount of craziness that happens in this town on that day. So we kind of had a little bit of a proof of concept, but we wanted to take it even further and just provide a whole different lens for exploring science. And we knew that there was a lot to be learned from going back and looking at the history of how things were and where they might go. And we also have money from the humanities, from the NEH, that we wanted to use in a unique way. And in general, if you start looking around, there is a growing interest in this topic and this area of study. Many universities are having really well-established history of science departments. Many professors are starting to study this area more deeply. There's a lot that we can learn from looking backwards at where we've been historically in science and how that takes us to the present day and what we can learn. So, and we're going to talk a little bit about this again later. And one of the evidences that we realized for the growing interest in this area is the proliferation of these micro-histories that have come out in recent years that explore, microcosms of science. Books such as rain and looking at the history of rain and what it's done, or, the history of alcohol or salt. All these little micro-histories that look at science in a small way is evidence of the people's interest in this area. And so we took that and ran with it. Uh-oh. Okay, so I'm going to turn things over to Hannah.
All right, so we ended up starting our planning and preparation about 4 or 5 months before the series began, both to make sure we were sort of covering all our bases, and then we realized that the people we were reaching out to, we need to get on their calendars far ahead of time. One of the biggest challenges that we found was narrowing down the focus as much as we could so that it seemed like a sort of comprehensible series for people who were coming to it. And we chose to focus primarily on local notables and physicists or physics because that happens to be there are an abundance of those kinds of people in our community who could come and speak. The Princeton University faculty has people who are in the history of science as their concentration. So they helped advise us on book selections and activities and different speakers who could be part of the series. We also wanted to make sure that our collection had the right books to support the series and have enough time to order those books to fill in some of the gaps so that people could take advantage of the supplementary kinds of passive programming where they could pick up a book and read about one of the topics even if they couldn't make it to a lecture or a book discussion. We also created a custom bibliography and a couple of book displays in the library to support the series, again, so people might become more aware of the series and also be able to read some material about it as well. We had to plan for staffing, obviously, and that varied depending on the size of the event. Our biggest event had 5 staff, and that was a large lecture where a lot of people came out. But for some of the smaller events, it was really 1 or 2 staff members who would check in on a book discussion or something like that to make sure that everything was moving smoothly. And we also had, obviously, the budget considerations to start out with. As Janie mentioned, the library is very fortunate to have an endowment through the National Endowment for the Humanities, and that's where the funding came for this, since it was sort of a interesting angle on a humanities topic, which is history, and it just happens to be the intersection with science as well. I think the budget really is scalable depending on honorariums that you're able to offer for different speakers and travel stipends. For us, we did it with minimal costs. Many of the people from the university and the Institute for Advanced Study were very generous with their time when we asked them to come be a part of the series as a book discussion leader or a lecturer or discussion leader of some kind. And the largest amount that we paid was an honorarium and a travel stipend for one of the out-of-town authors who was talking about Einstein, who was a huge draw in our town, so he was sort of worth the extra little bit of funding to have him come from out of town. Also, we took into account the screening fees for the documentaries and films that we showed. and also, as I mentioned, the books that we added to the collection to supplement the series. And taking into account also marketing, there were several ads that were taken out on Facebook, which were paid, and a newspaper ad can always be helpful, as well as flyer printing and program guide printing costs that you can take into account when you're starting to plan for all of these things. And now we're back over to Janie.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about marketing. In the slides, if you want to go, you can quickly peek over, but this is also included down below in the resources section. You can see it says Princeton Public Library History of Science handout. In that handout, we have given you links to connections, as well as the program guide, as well as a lot of other materials that we think could help you if you wanted to do your own History of Science series. And again, you don't have to follow exactly what we did, and obviously it would be really impossible because not everybody has Freeman Dyson in their community. If you don't know who Freeman is, when you look him up, you'll go, wow, he's a pretty big guy in the physics community. But I think the idea is that people do want to know about what we've done in the past historically. So Connections is our quarterly programming guide, and we featured this on the cover and with a very large feature article inside. It shared the cover with our annual Environmental Film Festival, which happens every year in the spring. So we were kind of overlapping a little bit. We had two really big series happening in the spring, and so we split the cover, which was unusual for us. We usually try to go for a single topic on our cover, but this kind of lent itself to that. We also made a program guide, and one of the nice things with the program guide that we really worked out well was that there was a very well-known history of science scholar who was willing to write us an introduction to the series, and we also were able to include in the program guide things like recommended readings, other things that they might want to watch on DVD, as well as the full events listing. We had a lot of interest in this in the local newspapers from the press release, and of course our social media outreach was great. Great response on things like Twitter especially, and on Facebook and Instagram were wonderful vehicles for all of getting our point across, as well as doing sliders on the front page of our website. We are fortunate in that we have a full-time marketing director here at the library and other people on our marketing team who are able to help make our productions top-notch. Probably the biggest expense in marketing, I mean, the cost of it being in Connections, that's something that we do anyhow, but we did do this separate program guide. And we put everything up on Issue, if you're not aware of what that is. It's a site where you can host your materials, ISSUU. And so even though we did print out several hundred of the History of Science program guides using the funding as a little booklet, it's also, lives online, and a lot of people could access it that way as well. So you might want to, investigate where you're going to host these materials for longevity. Okay, I'm going to send it back over to Hannah, who's going to just kind of go over some of the events and actual programs that we did. Here you go. Here's Hannah.
All right, so we ended up, as Janie mentioned at the beginning, with about 6 weeks worth of programs starting in March and running through the end of April. And we tried to have a wide enough variety of programs that, depending on what your interest was and the amount of time you wanted to spend at the library, you could come to a couple of different things. So you can see here we started off with a film screening with a discussion afterwards. Our really big event was that second one on March 8th with Freeman Dyson. We really packed the room, and people were really engaged with that one because he's a local notable who doesn't come out as much. He's 80 something perhaps, but he was very generous with his time and came out to have a lovely conversation with one of his colleagues about sort of his career in science. And our out-of-town author was the one who's pictured on the right there, who had written about Einstein and the planet Vulcan. We had a kids activity where an author had written a book about Ada Lovelace, who was one of the early computer pioneers, so that was a nice way to tie in a different age group. And we had 2 different book discussions on some formative texts in the history of science, which were led, one by the history of science faculty member and one by a graduate student in history of science at Princeton, who were both very generous with their time, and the discussions were nicely attended and people were really excited about it. The March 30th and the April 24th were two sort of local author historians who were again generous with their time and came to talk a little bit about, particularly in the case of that last one, a little bit of local history that also has to do with the history of science. So that was a nice way for us to tie into our own local history sort of at the end of the series there. So we found everyone was really eager to share their expertise with the community and come out and talk to a group that they might not have been able to reach before. So I will turn over to Janie for one of the cutest moments in the series.
So we just thought we'd highlight, what this kind of series can do. And so this is the night that we had, as we said, Freeman Dyson there, which was probably the highlight of the series. And there was, we noticed him right away. It was, the room was largely filled with adults, as we suspected, and there were a few high school students there and some college students. And there was one young boy there, and you can see him pictured. And we noticed him scribbling on a notepad busily throughout the whole thing. And then we opened up the floor to questions, and there was quite a lineup of adults at the microphone, and he got in line with the rest of the adults very confidently. And when he came up to the microphone, he asked some questions based very much upon what the moderator and Freeman had been discussing, and asking for some clarifications and also extending the topic a little bit. And both of the physicists up there, and by the way, the moderator is also a world-renowned physicist in his own right. He's kind of like the up-and-coming physicist. Took him so seriously and engaged with him in such a great dialogue. And then and the whole audience was just like, silent while this was going on. And then afterwards, he went up to Freeman Dyson for the book signing. He had brought his own copy of one of Freeman's earlier books, which is one of his favorite physics books. His goal in life is to be a physicist. And he afterwards made Freeman Dyson take his first ever selfie with him. And to him, this child's interaction with Freeman, especially at the book signing, it was like he was meeting his own rock star. And I just think anybody who says that, this wouldn't be something that this child will remember for the rest of his life would be greatly mistaken. And we did have some other tie-in programs that, reached out to children. On Pi Day, we did something on the Einstein, which is included more in the handout that we did. We did a Meet Einstein type of program, and we also did our annual Nano Day during this time where we explore nanoscience. So we really tried to, although this was a series aimed primarily at adults, we did try to, cross the gap and do some family programming and programming for younger kids as well. Okay, so Hannah's going to talk a little bit about how you might want to adapt this own theme for your community.
All right. So one of the important things I think we wanted to cover is how other communities could adapt this for your own local context. And as we talked about before, there's this sort of explosion of interest in publishing on the microhistories of salt and cod and all these different things that fall nicely into the history of science umbrella. So something like hosting a book discussion series to see if people are interested. It's not a huge investment of time or resources, but it would be a nice way to bring in community members and see if there's a larger interest in maybe an ongoing series on this kind of topic. Also, there are a ton of films out there. There's also this BBC series, The Story of Science. There's a lot of things available online that you could screen for the community and then have a discussion afterwards with an author or a scientist. And we found that having people Skype in actually works pretty much as well as having them there in person, as long as you've got the technology all set up and ready to go. It's comparable to having them in person, and it makes it much easier for scheduling and timing and not having to worry about getting someone to your location if that's not an easy thing to do. And then I think we'll just turn over to Janie for a little more about adaptation.
Okay, so again, I just want to mention that in the History of Science handout PDF that's below, we did give a list of possible microhistories that you might want to use, some that are tried and tested. And also, if you don't feel comfortable leading the book discussions yourself, I think I wanted to mention this before when Hannah was talking about it. She mentioned that we reached out and we had actually, university professors leading the book discussions for us. So if you're not an expert in science and you don't feel like you should be the one leading a book discussion on something scientific, reach out. You can, as we said here, use local resources like your high school science teachers might even come in and want to do that for you, or a scientist that's in the field. If you have any sort of, if you look in your community, you're going to find people who have an expertise in science at your community colleges or wherever it might be, who would likely be willing to come in and lead film discussions, book discussions, and help get this going for you. We recognize our privilege here in Princeton of having something like the Institute for Advanced Study in our backyard, as well as the Princeton University, that made this so easy. But as I said, there is still many, many ways to adapt this. And one of the other ones that we wanted to talk about would be to do TED Talks. And again, in the document, the History of Science handout, I think we list about a dozen TED Talks that are specifically labeled or really great for doing the history of science. So how a TEDx salon works is that you select 2 or 3 TED Talks on a topic, and you show them, and then afterwards you invite the community into a discussion about those talks. Or you could have, there's different ways that you can do it. You can have one speaker come in and kind of introduce the topic and do their own little mini TED Talk, and then watch 2 or 3 films and have the discussion. So I think not a lot of people would realize of going to TED to look for this theme, but it's really very rich on there. And the other thing that we really want you to do is, if you're going to try this type of program, is to reflect your region or your town as much as possible. So it was easy for us in some ways to do physics, but it's also, we knew that was of interest to our community. We knew this from past programs. We knew that any time that we did something related to physics that we could fill the room. So, but if you live in a farming community, maybe you want to do something about the history of farming implements. That is still very much science. Or, if you live in a coastal region, you might want to do, the science and the history of science of sailing and navigation and the water. Or you can, look around your community. If you're in a coal mining area, do something related to coal. If you're, in a big city, look at industrialization. There's a lot of different things. I mean, the umbrellas of science and the umbrella of a history are wide, and even when you combine the two, you still have a lot of different areas that you can go into, and you're going to be able to find the experts in your community that can help you put on a great series.
Great. Thanks, Janie and Hannah. Our next presentation showcases how a rural library with a small annual budget has created hands-on adult STEAM programming that is community-driven in both topic and teaching. Presenting on this is the Executive Director of Phelps Community Memorial Library, Leah Hamilton. Leah has a passion for creating and an inability to keep quiet about the benefits of makerspaces. In 2013, she facilitated the creation of her library's Makerspace, which is an 800-square-foot community space dedicated to creativity. Leah wholeheartedly believes in community building, collaboration, and being courageous with library programming. With that, I'll turn things over.
Thank you. So to switch gears a bit, we're going to talk about adult STEM programming on a smaller scale. The Phelps Library is an association library, and we have 2 full-time and 2 part-time staff. And each of us wear many hats. For instance, I'm director, graphic designer, program coordinator, marketing strategist, and whatever else I need to be at that moment. Our region is classified as small and rural, and so our area is historically agricultural with a population of about 7,000. We're going to begin by setting the stage for adult STEM programming, but where else in a laboratory? Here in Phelps, New York, our library has allocated 20% of our library space, or now around 1,000 square feet, for hands-on community learning. We call it the STEAM Lab Makerspace. Many people ask, why the A if it's STEM education? With art, people are empowered to think creatively and to design and engineer solutions to real-world problems. As soon as you walk in the door of the library, the Clean Technology area has walk-up access to a variety of newer and cutting-edge technologies. We often introduce new technologies by having passive programming on our maker table, as seen in the photo. Patrons can walk up to the display and try out technology to see what it can do. We advertise these passive programs on Facebook and other social media. In this photo, we've set up Makey Makeys so that patrons of all ages can learn what common household objects conduct electricity. At around 800 square feet, the majority of our programs take place in what we call the dirty technology area. This includes anything that makes dust, debris, scraps, or a mess. Our tools and gadgets have either been purchased or gathered through donations and yard sales. We have about 175 hands-on STEAM programs per year, and 85 of those were targeted towards adults, with around 450 attendees. All of our programs are led by volunteers, instructors, or library staff, with programming costs offset by materials fees that we strive to keep at around $5 or less, but never more than $10. In our STEAM lab, the idea is that we provide the tools and gadgets, and the users provide the materials. The STEAM lab is free and open for use during library hours, and you don't have to have a library card, although we do encourage it, and you don't have to be a resident of Phelps. As for programming, we've found that adults prefer to have an instructor to guide them, a designated time for a workshop, a project to complete, and something to take home. We've discovered that simply giving them a blank slate on which to design and create can be very intimidating and even scary for some. The word STEM programming can even be daunting for library staff, but it doesn't have to be. Today, I not only want to introduce you to some of the STEAM programs that we found to be quite successful, but I also want to show you how you can take your existing programs and turn them into STEM programs. Whether your library is large or tiny, well-funded or not, incorporating STEM programming shouldn't be scary or difficult. Libraries shouldn't feel pressured to have to come up with mind-blowingly innovative programs or be required to purchase expensive equipment. I'd like us all to consider the fact that maybe we're already offering programs that can be easily converted into STEM programs or already performing STEM roles within our libraries. It's much easier to bravely leap into STEM programming if we acknowledge that maybe we're already doing it. So looking at the top STEM careers out there, let's start with engineering. Engineers build things. They tinker. They transform things into something new and better. The local owner of a sawmill showed up one day at the library, and after having seen information about our STEAM lab in the annual appeal, he said he wanted to give back to the community and teach a woodworking class. And he wanted to do it for free. And he'd donate the wood as well. So saying yes to that one was certainly a no-brainer. Now, we could have just distributed the wood and said, cut here, sand that, and be done with it. But in our woodworking classes, we turn the class into STEM learning by explaining the science of it. Why the wood grain is like it is. What to look for when considering a piece of wood. We use the technology to shape the wood, engineering it into something other than a slab of wood by removing, or subtracting, some of its mass. In the way that you present the workshop, you've transformed a standard library program into a STEM program, and the learner will take home not only a cutting board, but real-world methods of problem solving the next time they have to deal with wood or wood structures. From home renovation to home decor, they will have a better understanding of how wood behaves, having personally engineered it. Now, all of these supply lists are available in the resources section below. We held this 2-hour class once a week for 3 weeks and limited the class to 6 participants so that the learners would not have to wait around too long to use the equipment. We charged an $8 materials fee, which covered all of the disposable supplies, and the library programming budget covered the cost of a $50 orbital sander. I also had to bring in a jigsaw from home. This class was pivotal. I have never seen 6 women so happy to have orbital sanders in their hands. These classes are always filled with laughter and a we're all in this together mentality. Now I can barely get sign-up sheets out of my office without having them full to partially full because people are signing up for waiting lists. We often have as many people on the waiting list as we have filled spots. It's kind of a blessing and a curse. You want to serve everyone, but there are only so many orbital sanders and seats to go around. We keep all of our hands-on classes between 6 and 16 attendees, depending on the difficulty of the skill and the number of tools we have on hand. And know that it's okay to ask everyone to bring in a hammer from home. What if we could take a skill that is considered a hobby or a craft and elevate it to a physics lesson? By simply adding a water and dish soap solution and explaining why we need to use that particular solution, we can introduce the theory of lubricated friction to a felting class. We offered a series of wet felting classes, making a book cover, felted bowls, a felted scarf, and felted flower jewelry. So again, instead of just doling out the supplies and having them go to it, we explain the wool fibers, through the science of friction, begin to bond with one another. This friction requires the addition of a lubricant, or dish soap mixed with water. We use a bamboo mat as the technology to convert these fibers from loose to bonded. The definition of technology is anything made by a human, and so a bamboo mat fits that requirement. We are engineering a product by building up with wool fibers, and we artistically place the fibers based on our own self-expression. Felting is mathematically an additive and quantitative process by which you create a 2D or 3D object. By explaining the process, they are able to problem solve if the wool fibers are not bonding, and they'll be able to determine on their own if they need more dish soap so that the fibers will slide around more easily, or when to add more water and why. Each felting class lasted for 2 hours and was limited to 12 people. There was a $5 materials fee to cover the cost of the wool roving, yarn, and jewelry findings. The towels are donated, and the library purchased the rest of the reusable supplies for about $40. We did have some challenges, and one was that the felted bowls are made by bouncing a ball for about an hour, and that requires a lot of stamina. We did have some tired arms in the class. The best part, though, was when a retired husband and wife were making felted jewelry together. People loved it and asked for more. We repeated the class a few months later with an equally enthusiastic response. This is Gail and Deborah after making bowls with bouncy balls. Gail is a retired teacher. She turned what she learned at the felting classes into a business. Because she learned the science behind the felting process, she was able to take these skills to the next level. Now she's in full production mode and is transforming her skills into her business, designing a logo, selling her work at festivals, and has even talked about opening an Etsy store. She wrote to us, "Who would have thought last April when I took a felting class at the STEAM lab at the Phelps Library that I would still be felting and loving it more every day. Now that I'm retired, I've been going to the same Makerspace to make bigger pieces. There's lots of room to spread out. I welcome anyone who wants to learn." So she's willing to share what she has learned in our Makerspace. And so we move on to chemistry and processes like oxidation and chemically bonding two types of molecules. So let's take that, what may sound terrifying, and turn it into some fun. Shibori is the ancient Japanese fabric dyeing technique using indigo dye and natural fibers. We had a series of 3 classes in which we dyed silk scarves, cotton flour sack towels, and cotton t-shirt weight sarongs. Dyeing the cloth involves a chemical process of oxidation. First, the participant folds the cloth in a particular way so that a pattern will emerge after the dyeing. Rubber bands or twine is then tied around the cloth. After the cloth is fully immersed in a bath of indigo dye, it is removed and the chemical process begins. Whatever is exposed to the air turns blue, and whatever is hidden beneath a fold or rubber band remains white. The learners needed to understand this chemical process so that they could tie and bind their cloth into a desired pattern. There was a $7 materials fee to cover the cost of the fabric, and the library purchased the rest of the supplies for about $75. I taught the class, learning from the Indigo Dying Kit how to do it and watching demonstrations on YouTube. I'd never done it before the class. Some of our challenges were that we did the silk scarves, the towels, and the sarongs, and all of these 3 different materials behaved differently. The silk scarves came out beautifully with amazing results. If you're going to do Shibori, I definitely recommend the silk scarves. The flour sack towels were more challenging because they were so bulky, and they ended up with a lot of white. The t-shirt weight of the sarong fabric was by far the most difficult because it breathed too much, so they often turned more blue than desired. It's also a messy project, but entirely worth it. One mother-daughter pair sewed these fish shapes into the cloth prior to dipping it in the indigo bath. The result of this experiment was quite impressive and even made the local newspaper. Another challenge can also be a benefit. That's the intergenerational nature of Makerspace classes. The younger inspires the older guides the younger, but sometimes the younger annoys the older if the younger doesn't belong to the older. In this class, our ages ranged from age 7 to retirees, and these are the results of the class. Our next class is the hand-dyed fibers, where we dyed yarn and wool roving. This class allowed for an amazing freedom of expression. There's a lot of chemistry involved as we had to work together to achieve the appropriate acidic levels for the fibers to absorb the dye. We talked about why the acids needed to be present in order for the chemical process to take place, and that if we did not use enough of the citric acid, for example, the dye molecules would not properly bond with the fiber molecules. We had to use thermometers to keep the temperature of the dye water acid solution within certain parameters, and at the end of the dyeing process, we had to add heat to the yarn to fully set the dye. It was truly like following a mathematical equation. There was a $3 materials fee to cover the cost of the yarn. The library purchased the rest of the reusable supplies for about $100. I again taught the class, learning from a library book and demonstrations on YouTube. I used the community center's kitchen, which is located within our shared building, so that was a nice collaboration. A couple of challenges was having to work in a space that was not our own, not a terrible thing, but that was a lot of equipment to transport because we had to purchase 8 large soup pots. Our ages ranged from 15 to retirees, and attending the program was the 15-year-old winner of the 2016 National Make It With Wool fashion show and competition. You just never know who's in your community until you bring the community together. People have mentioned how wonderful it has been to find each other and to know that there are like-minded people with similar interests. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, some of these challenges that we face. I like to see the challenges as opportunities for education and growth. So I mentioned the intergenerational nature. It can cause conflicts, but it can also be a great inspiration. Kids come up with some of the most amazing ideas that we adults would never think of, and adults can share learning experience with younger attendees. So I highly recommend the intergenerational nature. Another one is not having enough tools to go around, but you can always borrow from home or from a neighbor. Sometimes we don't have enough staff, and this is where our volunteers come in. We are so grateful that we're able to provide all of these programs with volunteer instructors. How we communicate is also an issue so that our learners can apply the knowledge beyond the program. You know, everybody learns differently, and so we have to be open to that and to anticipate and even hope for mistakes so that we can inspire problem solving. Also, these programs tend to be messy, but we are fortunate to have the space to be messy, and being messy is fun. You may be wondering about liability with hot liquids, sharp objects, and power tools. Each participant is required to sign our user agreement and liability waiver prior to the program, so that can be found on our website at phelpslibrary.org. It's also in the resources section below. We as librarians are doing STEM research on a daily basis. We study our communities and learn what makes them tick, and then we apply that knowledge on a daily basis in real time. We engage in sociological studies when we communicate with our communities. We listen, we gather data, and we design programs based on that data. Through active communication, we can find patrons to attend our programs, volunteers to teach our workshops, and attendees to spread the word to the community. We can find program instructors among our staff, our friends, our family, and our patrons. For instance, I love paper crafting and photography and graphic design, and I can teach that. The software engineer down the street loves 3D printing and Arduino. He can share that. The sawmill owner across town loves woodworking and wants to give back to his community. Your best friend may love felting and other textile crafts. Everyone who knows someone is passionate about something. Let them share that knowledge with your library users. It all starts with a conversation and a collection of information. I found our instructor for adult finger painting class at a local framing shop. We both were outside waiting to go in at the same time and struck up a conversation. Little did I know that he was a world-famous artist who paints with the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra and has works in Bangkok and Belgium and other places across the world. This discussion turned into a collaboration with our local arts center, and I ended up curating a full art exhibit of his work at the Phelps Art Center, and he offered an adult finger painting class. So don't be afraid to ask and strike up a conversation. Our finger painting class, we found that people are often afraid of a blank page and finger paint and no restrictions because they don't know where to begin. So if you put the supplies in front of them, finger paint, paper, paper towels, water, and, key to this, permission to make mistakes, they will have a blast. Our class attendees didn't want to go home that night. And finally, we end with a STEM-based market research analysis, another example of a STEM job that we do each and every day. In Phelps, we've found that there are many ways and many places to advertise programs, and some are much more effective than others. We advertise programs in the places that patrons say they always look, but inevitably, they never saw our ad when there's a class they wanted to take. It's a conundrum, but we keep trying. We've gathered information on the most effective ways to advertise and market adult STEM programs, and by far it has been our RAC card that has helped convey the limitless possibilities that can take place in the STEAM Lab Makerspace. It has brought the Scouts in, holding their meetings and lock-ins in the library so that they can use the circuitry sets and other Makerspace technologies. It has initiated conversations on how to use technologies and why patrons might need it. It has revived long-forgotten projects collecting dust in people's garages at home. We always have something referencing the STEAM Lab on every piece of marketing released to the public. As for advertising individual programs, I don't think that any of these on this list will come as a surprise to you. Social media, our digital newsletter, our annual appeal, newspaper articles, and word of mouth have brought in the most learners. But by far, it has been the newspaper articles that have appeared on the front page, above the fold, in color, that stirred the most interest, as well as word-of-mouth advertising. It's friends telling friends about their positive experiences, parents bringing children, children bringing parents, library staff always being on whenever they're outside of the library. For instance, I was at home last year having my furnace serviced. I had a nice conversation with the technician, and learning that he was technically minded, I mentioned our 3D printer. By the time the service visit was over, I had him signed up for a 3D printing class. He'd never been in the library before. So whether you're at the grocery store, the gas station, or behind the desk at work, be bold and share what you're passionate about. It starts some fabulous conversations. So I've shared with you how we've taken our programming to the next level and infused STEM, and these are examples that work for our community. What is best for your community is also what is best for your STEM programming. Every library is different. Every staff's skill set is different. Play to your strengths and community interests. Teach what you're passionate about. A successful STEM program is dependent upon the people involved. If you have an enthusiastic instructor, even if they're not an expert, this will make learning fun for your adult learners. One wonderful instructor introduced us to the catchphrase, "It's all about the process." My first foray into felting involved placing beautiful colors of wool roving on a gorgeous geometric pattern. After I had felted it, it looked like hamburger meat. It was disgusting, and "It's all about the process" henceforth became our STEM programming mantra. It relieves the fear of not knowing how to do something. It releases you from any attachment to expectations of what the end product will look like. It allows you to avoid using the word mistake and instead calling it a learning experience. If you remove the fear of making a mistake for your adult learners and explain the whys of the process to them so that they can apply it to their lives outside of the library program, your STEM programs are sure to be a success. That's what I have for today. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Leah. So we have about 14 minutes left for some Q&A, so go ahead and type those questions into the chat box now. And it looks like we already have some questions. So we will start off with one from Denise Laud. This is for Hannah and Janie. Do you find that Skype works just as well as in-person lectures?
Yeah, I mean, we use Skype a lot, especially with film programs. People love to be able to Skype in afterwards with their director, and you'd be amazed when you reach out how frequently producers or directors of especially documentaries will be willing to Skype in to answer questions about the process, and we find that really is a lot of value added. So I think Skype really does work when it's not like the main thing. So I'd say I got author Skype talk when it's just the author is not great, but we've done panels where there is, you know, 2 or 3 in-person panelists and 1 person Skyping in as a supplement. Or as I said, if we do a film screening, we supplement in, or we Skype in an expert at the end, and that works very well. So I wouldn't say like just advertising as a Skype author event. We've tried to do those, and they're not as well attended, but if you have the Skype as part of it, if there's somebody special or unique that you want to have as a topic.
Great. Thanks, Janie. So the next one is also for you. It's from Erin Gray. It's, how did this series compare with other adult programming you have offered at your branch?
I'll take that one while it's Janie again. So we do a lot of programming here, obviously, and we've been, you know, very heavily programming for a number of years. You know, I would say it had one of our biggest attendance of the years for certain programs. All the programs were heavily attended, and as what I would expect. You know, the book discussions had 10 to 12 people, as you would want. You wouldn't want them much larger than that for a good discussion. The lectures, the Freeman Dyson one, I think we had close to 200 for that, Hannah? Yeah. You know, some of the smaller lectures, 75 to 80, and that's about what we average for lectures when we bring in a bigger name. Our community room kind of tops out at 200, so sometimes we do go off-site and find a bigger venue, but it did better than average in terms of attendance, and we were really pleased with the interactions and the feedback from the community on it.
Great. Thanks, Janie. This one is for Leah. It's from Audrey Barbkoff. When integrating STEM into craft/DIY programs, what kind of language do you use to demonstrate the value of these programs? STEM as a phrase tends to resonate most with our youth and parents, but isn't always meaningful to adults, and crafts is usually interpreted as not educational.
We don't actually use STEM in any of the language. We do call it the STEAM Lab, and that is as far as we hit people over the head with it. We just want it to be fun and interesting, and so I think to keep things as basic as possible is the best way forward, to give a basic understanding of the new skill that we are teaching. So felting, a lot of people don't know what felting is, so we might explain a little bit of the process. It requires research on our part, but we keep it as simple as possible, and like I said, we never describe it as STEM learning.
Great, thanks, Leah. I have a few more questions for you. Ashley L. asks, did you find that patrons are ever impatient with the teaching aspect and just wanted to get to the crafts?
We do provide an area where you can continue to learn if you don't understand something. We have laptops around the room if they want to watch extra YouTube videos or want to see something over again. We do have probably about 75% of the class is just raring to go. They just want the basics. But most of our people come in not having done the skill before at all. So we have the materials out. If they want to go to it, we let them do it, because making mistakes that's the best way to learn. I would rather see somebody try to solve the problem on their own or work together with somebody who may have more or less experience and learn together. It's a great environment for learning in a social situation like that.
Great. This one is from Erin Gray. How do you track usage of the STEAM lab?
It's kind of archaic, but we have a calendar. We have one entry into our library, and if they are using the passive programming, we make a little check mark depending on what they're doing. We have it categorized on the side of our calendar, use the Lego robotics or use the Lego wall. If somebody uses the STEAM lab, that gets a tick mark. We keep track of the different activities that people have done in the STEAM lab because there is a safety training that they have to go through. You can't just throw somebody on a wood lathe and say, go to it. They have to learn how to use the equipment and the safety procedures. So I keep track of that on each of their individual user agreement and liability waivers.
Great. This one's from Charles Day. How do you source content creators for your social media channels? Do you find that Tumblr, Facebook, or Instagram works best?
Since I'm still on, we focus mainly on Facebook. That seems to be where most of our community goes to check out information.
Great. Janie or Hannah, do you have any tips for how social media, you've been working with that in your history of science thing to source lecturers?
Yeah, we used social media to get the word out initially. We have a pretty active Twitter that's maintained mostly by Janie, and also our Facebook page is pretty good. We don't use Instagram to sort of get the word out about things. It's usually sort of after the fact that we'll post a picture of an activity or something like that. Also during the series we had a hashtag to go with it in case people wanted to use it on Twitter or elsewhere. And it really, I think our two main channels are really Facebook and Twitter in terms of getting the information out to the community.
Great, thanks. So we have about 5 minutes left. If anyone has any other questions, I see one other person typing. We'll give them a few minutes.
While we're waiting, one thing I do when we name our classes, and this is Leah talking from Phelps Library, is if we have a series, I do number 1, number 2, number 3, because people will then say, oh, I missed number 1 and 2, what was it? And that shows us that they were interested in that series, and we can repeat classes.
Great, yeah, that's good to know. So Chris Dale is asking, is one person doing most of the posting for your social media, or is it sourced from whoever wants to post?
This is Janie chiming in. So we've done various iterations at our library, and right now what we have is a manager for each of our social media channels. So I manage the Twitter channel, the head of PR does the Facebook channel, and then another one of our librarians the Instagram channel. And there are teams, and it's planned out in advance. Twitter is the one that's a little bit more informal, and people can hop on there a little bit more because Twitter, it goes by. Our Instagram channel is very carefully curated and planned out. Not to say that there's not spontaneous things that we don't pop up there. For instance, one day I was in the library and a bride and groom came through and I caught it and I posted it. So that we still want that spontaneity, but we also want to make sure that it's planned. Facebook right now, we have set aside, we mostly do paid ads on there because it's the only way to really get traction with the way they've, stifled and dialed down the natural reach that can be done on there. The pipes are kind of slowed down. So we set aside money that we used to put a lot towards our newspaper ads, and instead we're putting it into Facebook ads, and they get a lot of traction and a lot of attention. So, but we keep our social media kind of a cross between the two, managed but also allowing for the spontaneity that is social media.
And here in Phelps, we have one person. One of my staff members is in charge of posting to Facebook.
And that one person's probably you, right?
No, it's not me. It's not.
Oh, really?
It is my senior clerk and IT specialist, and the other half of my brain who assists me with the STEAM Lab Makerspace.
Okay, because you seem to have so many hats, I thought it might be you.
I occasionally post on Facebook, but the vast majority of it is my staff member.
Great. We have time for one final question, and it looks like Donna Ives-Kimple would like to know if you do any evaluation for your programs, and if so, do you ask participants to fill something out? Hannah and Janie, let's start with you, and then we can...
So we do a variety of things for program evaluation. One is that we have our own in-house program forum where the library staff member who is running the program is encouraged to put down thoughts and reflections on what happened. We have meetings where we discuss what went on and whether it was a worthwhile program and how it could have changed. Because we do so many programs, we don't always hand out forms, but we do try and do it for sometimes for certain series. We didn't for this particular series. But we will, like for something like our Environmental Film Festival, we have a form that we hand out. Sometimes we just choose a period, like a 2 or 3 week period, and we hand out forms at every program asking for feedback. We've done some digital surveys. I think really we found that, with the volume of programs that we do, to constantly be handing out the forms and trying to track it, we were spending so much time trying to enter the data and track it that it wasn't worth it. So we try to do spot checks. We get a lot of natural feedback. We have a community that's not afraid to express itself, both good and bad. Right now we're doing a very popular series on racial literacy, and we're just getting comments coming in. We have a comment section on our website, people giving us feedback and commenting how much they're enjoying it and appreciating it or learning from it. And that was the same during the History of Science series. We got a lot of positive feedback, comments, but nothing formal for that one other than our own assessment.
Yeah. Great, thanks. Leah, do you have anything?
Yes, occasionally we do hand out paper forms. It just asks, what did you like best? What would you change? And are there any future programs that you'd like us to offer? But most of our feedback comes from having conversations with the people during the class, which I make note of. It comes in the introductions where I share what we do at our Makerspace, and just being active listeners at conversations that happen at the circulation desk. And all of our programming is community driven. If the community expresses that they want to learn more fiber arts, and that seems to be the direction that a lot of it goes, then that's what we'll do. We'll learn what we need to and acquire the supplies that we need to in order to offer those particular programs. And if they want us to purchase new tools and technologies, then that's how we grow and evolve our makerspace, is based on community input.
And great, thanks, Leah. So it looks like we are out of time. A huge thank you to Hannah, Janie, and Leah for this presentation, and to all of you for joining us today. This webinar will be available for viewing on programminglibrarian.org within a couple of hours. Thanks, everyone.